Holy smokes. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and your friends if you want to support this rebel outpost. If you want to support the home for college football sickos with a donation to help us keep the lights on, hit that $sign where you make a comment and I'll get to your super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome everybody into the studio that sits on the corner. The very corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a legend. With your comments and with your phone calls during the show. We have got a stack show. We've got a Rutgers new president. And now they're going to be able to get their new athletic director at some point. Correct? Yes. They got the LSU president. Now he becomes the president of Rutgers. We've got the Iowa State athletic director talking about, come on now, let's all pool our media rights together. Let's be more like the NFL. And we got the Kansas State athletic director. The Kansas State athletic director saying, yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten, they're not interested in any more expansion for right now because They don't want to share anymore. They do not want to share anymore. Some of that is true. No question about it. And then we go to Matt Hayes, the USA Today network. He uses some very harsh language. He's trying to explain why Florida State is trying to get the best, toughest schedule they can possibly can so they can give themselves the ability to make as much money as they can because, well, they're not heading to the Big Ten. We talked about how at some point and at some time we were going to get people coming out speculating on what is going to happen in these ACC, the top brands of the ACC. It's dribbling out a little bit, not as much, not what I thought it was going to happen, but people are starting to say, look, this is the reality here, this is the reality there. Clemson is scheduling tougher games. Florida State is doing the same. These are the reasons why, yada, yada, yada. Now, I would not use the language that Mr. Matt Hayes uses. I would not use the words that Matt Hayes used. I have never spoken to Matt Hayes. Matt Hayes probably doesn't know who I am. Or maybe he does. I do not know. But I can tell you this. What Matt Hayes is expressing is what the chatter behind the curtain has been told on Florida State going to the Big Ten. And they've been told this for a very long time. In fact, just a couple of months ago or 6 weeks ago or wherever, when War Chant came out with that report that they had heard that the Big Ten was, what was the phrase? Instigating. The Big Ten was instigating expansion talks with Florida State. I made a bunch of phone calls and all of them said, it ain't happening. The Big Ten may be talking with Florida State. They're talking with everybody. The ACC schools, they have been aggressive, but the Big Ten is definitely not instigating expansion talks with Florida State. Now, I respect War Chant, but I had to do my job here at Peek Around the Corner. I got to tell you guys what I'm hearing to the point that I can. And I came out a couple hours after that War Chant report, and I said that it's not happening. It's not happening. Now, again, War Chant has their own sources, and I said at the time, they may be correct, I may be wrong, I'll take the L and all that stuff. But we don't believe we are wrong. Matt Hayes now says it. John Wilner said it earlier in the month of May, first week in May. And there are other reporters that have been told this. We know this. And when they report it, they'll report it. I would not use look, never is a very long time. Never, forever. This ain't going to happen forever. I try to stay away from that type of language. So we're going to go through the Matt Hayes article. And basically he says, Florida State's never going to the Big Ten. They've never negotiated with the Big Ten, no matter what the clowns in social media have said. There has never been first party talks. We know that here at Peek Around the Corner. It was impossible. We know there's no negotiating going on between the Big Ten and Florida State when it comes to expansion. Not at this time. But we also here at Peek Around the Corner, when we go through some of these scenarios, we have been honest. We have been honest. Florida State and other schools in the ACC, they need the right blend. They need the right combination. They need the right scenario. They need the correct dominoes to fall. Florida State is one of those schools. It is the largest football brand in the ACC. It is incredibly valuable, and we have been truthful. We have said this for 2 years. Florida State is going to reach the level that they need to get to compete at the highest level of sports, and that route might not take you to the Power 2. We know here at Peek Around the Corner that there has now. How do I say this? We have been told, and it's why we did the live show on June 15th of last year, that Petiti and Sankey walked out of the Holy Smokes Theater, and Florida State and Clemson were not the number one targets for the Big Ten or the SEC. That remains true today. But I'm not going to completely shut the door down on possible Florida State to the Big Ten. We are not at Peek Around the Corner going to completely shut the door down on that. What we have done here at Peek Around the Corner have completely shut the door down on Florida State and Clemson being the combination. That ain't going to happen. There is no chance of that happening. That just isn't that isn't going to get the votes in the Big Ten. It ain't going to come close. Florida State needs the right combination, or Clemson needs the right combination, and they are not right for each other, not in the Big Ten. We have gone over this many, many, many times. Now, I know there's YouTube channels out there that have said differently, and I respect them, and I know I know they're honest. Their sources, I think, have led them astray. It ain't. Florida State and Clemson are not the ones directing the Big Ten expansion. It's not even close to that. It hasn't been. And there have been people out there who honestly, by honest means, they thought that Florida State would be the number one target of the Big Ten. And I don't blame them. Look how big a valuable school Florida State is. Look at that football brand. Look at that fan base. Look at that money, the ticket sales, the eyeballs. Good, honest people have said they believe, they've been told that Florida State is going to go to the Big Ten, number one target of the Big Ten. They got to go to the Big Ten. There are good, honest people who have said that. There has been some dishonest people. There have been certain people out there that have been wrong for a decade. They know they don't talk to anybody. They know they're not serious. And they've been going on for a couple of years saying Florida State has an invitation to the Big Ten. They've been approved by Fox and the Big Ten presidents. I've showed you all the posts. I've got them all saved. I don't need to do it again. There have been dishonest people screwing with the Florida State fan base. And those same morons, those same unserious people, then they accuse me of doing this for clicks and views. Really? Tell them the truth that Florida State is not the number one target of the Big Ten or the SEC, is not saying it for clicks and views, you morons. That is the opposite of grifting, you morons. What we have done here at Peek Around the Corner is we told you the truth. The doors were open to us last summer. We finally, I warned everybody about this. I warned everybody. Every YouTube channel host that I talked to. Everybody who has tapped me on the shoulder. Everybody who has called me, texted me. I warned them. No matter what type of graphics you want to put out there, no matter what type of spreadsheet you want to put out there, it just isn't accurate that the Big Ten is looking at Clemson first or second, or looking at Florida State first or second. Now, you can rip on the Big Ten. I rip on the Big Ten all the time. But that is not, there has been no first party negotiations. There has been no invitation. Now, I've already seen it in the chat room. First of all, I want to make it perfectly clear. And we're seeing this today. We're seeing this through Clemson's actions and Florida State's action. More stuff is coming. But Florida State and Clemson are two valuable brands not to get where they need to get above the revenue stratification line. Number one, they won massive victories in the courts. Number two, I still think they got a shot at getting into the SEC. I have not been shy about that. If the SEC presidents need Clemson and Florida State to come along with them as they pursue North Carolina and Virginia. But I'm going to tell you guys, I have never spoken to Matt Hayes. I have never spoken to John Wilner. Not on a telephone, not in text messages, on X, on Twitter. I tried to get John Wilner's attention about the USC story, but he ignored me. USC 247 did not ignore me, but other West Coast people did. I would tell you, though, Matt Hayes might be wrong. He could be wrong. The fat guy from Minnesota, my sources could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I will take the big L. But Matt Hayes, John Wilner, Heather Dinich, on and on and on and on and on, all of them. Brett McMurphy, in that big article that he wrote in last August. The reason why Matt Hayes used the language that he used, and we're going to go through it in the back end of the monologue, and the reason why I went out there on June 15th all alone without a parachute, and I said what I said, is because the Big Ten and the SEC have not kept this a secret. They have told everybody the same thing. We're not looking to expand, and if we are going to expand, The Big Ten is looking at North Carolina and Notre Dame, and the SEC is looking at North Carolina. And whatever needs to happen with North Carolina, for the SEC to get North Carolina, that is going to happen. And if the Big Ten ain't going to get North Carolina and Notre Dame, there's really only one scenario left that the Big Ten would be interested in, and that's Miami and something. And that is not a foregone conclusion. But Miami is in a pretty good spot. Everything else is just, we don't know. Everything else is, we're trying to read the tea leaves. But it has been told to the chatter behind the curtain, explicit, directly. No, we're not interested in this. The Big Ten is no longer interested in this. They are not, the Big Ten is not thirsty for expansion. It needs to be the correct combination. North Carolina and something, Notre Dame or something. And if those two things aren't going to happen, then there's a possibility of a Miami and something. That ain't going to be Florida State and Clemson. It isn't going to be, it just isn't going to happen. Now, we are going to go through this, but I have not, look, I can only assume the language that Matt Hayes used on his article on USA Today Network. It was brutal, but you know he's been told this. Josh Pate has come out and said, my source, Josh Pate said it live. He said, my source told me, there's a source that has told me that Florida State is never going to go to the Big Ten. Again, I said it then and I'll say it now. I'm not going to use that language. But they need the right, they need everything to fall just correctly for it to happen. But anybody out there that has been telling you that Florida State is Big Ten 19, or they've already got an invitation, and they've already been they're talking right now with expansion and all that. None of that has been true. None of it. We've got a lot to get to. We got to talk USC, Notre Dame. We have got a stack show today. Holy smokes. Thanks for coming on in. I do appreciate it. My goodness, let's do a quick roll call here. Nick Kelso, Larry the GM, Old Dad, AMAC, Kayla Ramirez, The Big Gun Shop, Healing, Florida, Antoine Johnson, Jeff Morgan, Humble Bumble Duck, Amazing Blue, Bill G, Daniel Gorby, Jay Chapman, John Uzi is in the house. CFB Plus is here. Jay Chapman, Richard Tumasta, Jeff Olson, the Evil Badger. Gerald McKinley is in the house. Anthony Carlson is here. The Almighty Finn. Dogs and Dubs. Rock and Rant. Rock and Rant is in the house. Eric Johnson. Skaven, yes, yes. The Cornhusker hype is starting to build once again. But this time it might not be false hype. Skaven, yes, yes. This time it might not be false hype for the Cornhuskers. We shall see. I got the keys. Keith Moore. Tough Tony is in the house. Tough Tony is in the house. Donald Duck is here. Donald Duck, Daniel Gorby. Matt Hayes is not a respected sports reporter. He's just not. Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that opinion. I get it. But then that's what everybody said about Brett McMurphy saying that. I mean, it's on and on. And everybody who says the same thing is being said that they're not reputable, that they're not to be believed. except I can't go there, but this is not a secret. That's why you don't have any reporter going out there saying Florida State is the number one target for the SEC in the Big Ten, and there's a bidding war. You're not going to see any reporter report that. And no, it's not a shot at Florida State. It just so happens to be the truth right now because of what the presidents want, what they're pursuing, and frankly, they're not pursuing a whole lot right now. There's a lot of action behind the curtain when it comes to the top brands of the ACC schools. That is true. That's going to come out. But you're not seeing any reporter, you're not going to see any reporter refute what Matt Hayes said. No reporter refuted what Brett McMurphy said. In fact, Michael Alford in Florida State didn't refute anything that Brett McMurphy said. Nobody refuted what I said 6 weeks prior to Brett McMurphy's report. So, because it's coming from somewhere inside the SEC and the Big Ten. That's why these reporters are so confident in what they're putting out. But I get it. Preston from Greensboro is in the house. Gold Black 45, Christopher Shannon is here. Kill Ball is in the house. Morris Simmons, Gold Nose 2027. Mayor McCheese. My camera's out of focus? My camera is out of focus? I don't see it on my, Laura Weiss, Red Raider is here. Morris Simmons, do not like ESPN. Don Scruggs is in the house. Who else is here? Stormy Cyclone is here. Daniel Gygax is here. BYU Cougar Kenneth Stromness. Sam I Am 8911SK is in the house. If I've missed you, I apologize. 704 is in the house. Michael K19th C-Fan is here. Mr. Monkey says Stephen Vitt is here. Bobby Hansen is here. Terry Kane. Mr. Hurricane is in the house. AMAC. Ryan Brooks. Florida Man. Gold Nose. Gold Nose. Okay. Theo Bill. No, I'm sorry. LYFEO Bill is in the house. MBM, Oklahoma State Cowboy is here. Okay. I think I got everybody. Devil Frog. Mary Crocker Rowe. Clickbait. Absolutely. I guess it's clickbait. I'm out of focus for people, huh? Well, that is interesting. I wonder why that is. I look focused here. Well, there is more work I'm going to have to do after the live show. I'm not going to be able to fix that now. Just hear the sound of my voice. There have been some outrageous podcasts the last 2 weeks. Okay, let's get to it. I apologize for not being in focus. Tony says I'm okay. Mr. Monkey says. Daniel Gorby says I look normally bad. I always look bad. Remember that. Greg, who you got? Timberwolves or Thunder? You know who I got, Oklahoma. You know who I got, Mr. Sooner. Timberwolves, baby. After they win the NBA World Championship, this studio no longer will be sitting in the middle of Loserville City, and I will no longer be your mayor of Loserville City. Timberwolves gonna win it all. Let's go. Okay. As we said, Rutgers. William F. Tate is the new Rutgers president. He currently holds the same job at LSU. Should be good news for athletics, one would think. Rutgers finally got their new president, and now they're going to be able to get their new athletic director. The search will begin. Iowa State Athletic Director Jamie Pollard says if given the power, he would go back in time and restructure college sports to foretell the issues facing the industry today. We're not fixing the problem. We're prolonging the inevitable. The problem is you cannot put a professional model over the top of college sports, but then want to run it like college sports. The NFL has one commissioner. There's not 4. There's not 8. Can you imagine if the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Lions had a commissioner in the NFC East? Had their commissioner? And they were all doing their own television deals? Our structure is not correct. There was a time that college football had a bigger television deal than the NFL. But all the pro leagues went one way and college went the other way. And now we're not even close to those television deals. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that way? And the biggest glaring deal is how we're set up. We're set up that we don't pool our rights. We make a rule, and before the rule is codified, we're already figuring out how to get around the rule. It's absolutely ludicrous. So the inevitable is coming. The inevitable has started. You've seen shrinkage. Every day I pick up the paper and see a post that another institution is in debt of millions of dollars. The economics are not sustainable. They just aren't. Again, Iowa State Athletic Director making it known how he feels about what is going on. He wants everybody's rights, their content to be pulled together. One seller to create leverage. That's what Iowa State Athletic Director wants. What do you want to happen? Put it down in the chat room. Give me a call later in the show. Boy, it's going to be difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube. I don't know. I mean, how far? I would love to ask the athletic director, Pollard, a question at Iowa State. My question would be, I get that you want the Big Ten and the SEC, those schools, to join you in the Big 12 and the ACC schools as one seller of your content. But who else are you inviting? Who are you inviting Iowa State? Who are you going to push up? Are you going to be inviting anybody in the MAC conference? Any of the MAC schools to put their content into that pool? Or does that line just end after the Big 12 content? That would be my question. That question never seems to get asked with these athletic directors. I would love that question to be asked. Again, put down your comments and thoughts in the comment section below the video. Let me know in the phone call what you think of all that. Then the Kansas State Athletic Director, Gene Taylor, notes that if the league had not been aggressive, the Big 12, Brett Yormark, in conference realignment, we could have been Oregon State and Washington State without a home. Absolutely true. Brett Yormark, what Yormark was able to do was pretty incredible. And that is why when people rip on him right now today about Big 12 revenue figures, holy smokes, the guy saved the conference. He absolutely saved the conference by taking the deal, ESPN and Fox, the exposure deal, ahead of the Pac-12, and now next time he's going to have to get a revenue deal. No question about it. The Big 12 is going to have to take that big swing on revenue, But what he did on October 30th of 2022 saved the Big 12, and the Kansas State Athletic Director, Gene Taylor, is reminding everybody of this. Later on, Taylor says he believes that realignment among power conferences is likely done for now. For now. As the SEC and the Big Ten, they don't want to share anymore, but you never say never. Absolutely. You never say never. Now let's quickly go to the USC story here. Let's quickly go to the USC-Notre Dame. We talked about this 3 months ago here at Peek Around the Corner, hoping the Rutgers new athletic director Tate takes Rutgers to a higher level. Xmas Talks, Mr. Rutgers, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate your generosity. Thank you for keeping the lights on for us. Xmas Talks. Rutgers, new president from LSU, and now you got to get your athletic director. Who is it going to be? Are there any names out there? Probably not. But maybe you have one. Xmas Talks. Let me know. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it so very much. Appreciate it so very much. Let's get to the Notre Dame. USC. Pat Forte. Notre Dame USC football series in jeopardy. But the Irish looking to extend the rivalry. We don't go through the whole article here. The 2025 game is the last in the current contract between the Blue Blood programs, and the Trojans offered only a 1-year extension. With the potential end to the storied USC Trojans, Notre Dame Fighting Irish football series looming, the Irish athletic director Pete Bavacqua has made it clear that his school, Notre Dame, is seeking a long-term extension of the rivalry. When asked by Sports Illustrated on Monday whether USC and Notre Dame plan to play annually, Bavacqua said, "I think Southern Cal and Notre Dame should play every year for as long as college football is played, and Southern Cal knows that's how we feel." The two football blue bloods have met 95 times since 1924, playing every year but 3 during World War II and during the 2025 COVID-19 pandemic. The October 18th game in South Bend is the last one in the current contract. USC has offered a 1-year extension to play in Los Angeles in 2026, sources tell Sports Illustrated, while Notre Dame desires another long-term deal. Discussions are still ongoing between the two schools, sources say. USC officials declined comment Monday, citing the ongoing talks. USC has expressed reluctance to enter into a long-term deal due to the uncertainty about the future college football playoff format. And while assessing the demands of greater travel as a member of the Big Ten, USC has broached the idea of moving the game to a season opening spot on the schedule, sources tell Sports Illustrated. And then finally, no annual series matches programs with more national titles. Notre Dame has won 9 championships, and USC 7 since the Associated Press poll was begun in 1936, which established a national standard for recognized champions. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. We covered this on a members-only early peek cloak and dagger. If you want to become a member, go to the description box below the video. There is a link provided. Hit that link, become a member. You can watch our early peek cloak and dagger episodes. We put an episode out there 3 months ago that said USC is going to do right by USC when it comes to this series. There's a whole bunch of issues here. One, how does the college football playoff format looks like in the future? If you're going to have all these auto bids in the Big Ten, for example, and it's based on conference records, which is going to be, then you can stack up those non-conference schedules. You can play a tougher schedule in the non-conference, and it ain't going to hurt you, or at least it ain't going to hurt you like it used to. There are probably still going to be at-large bids open, but having a tougher non-conference schedule may not hurt you. However, playing Notre Dame at the beginning of the season, I mean, imagine USC having 9 Big Ten conference games, and then you add in this possible crossover game with the SEC, if that happens, and then you add on Notre Dame. Wow. All I'm saying is, with all that travel, 9 Big Ten games, 1 game against the SEC, which is going to rotate between home and away if that series happens, and now you're playing Notre Dame every year like you have been. There's a lot of wear and tear on the USC Trojans. They're thinking about all that stuff. We reported to you 3 months ago. They're still in negotiations. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, but my goodness. Okay. And now let's get to the big story of today. Matt Hayes, USA Today Network. This was on May 16th. Florida State pursues toughest football schedule possible to raise ACC television revenue. Amelia Island, Florida. He strolled around the place with a purpose. Like a guy who knew something everyone else didn't. Like a guy who got what he wanted all along. We are in a very good position right now, Florida State Athletic Director Mike Alford said Wednesday during break in the annual ACC spring meetings. Everything is moving forward. What a strange and eventually fruitful ride it has been. Matt Hayes, USA Today. Florida State was never headed to the Big Ten. Florida State was never negotiating with the Big Ten or having back channel talks with the Big Ten. No matter what some clown on social media proclaimed. No, Christopher, that's definitely not a shot at me. Especially when I've been saying the opposite. We got a lot more to get to, but again, Florida State was never headed to the Big Ten. Florida State was never negotiating with the Big Ten or having back channel talks with the Big Ten. As we have reported forever, there was no first party talks. It was impossible. There was no invitation. There was no wink and a nod. There is none between the Big Ten or any other ACC school. Now, Matt Hayes says Florida State was never head of the Big Ten. Yes, there's a difference between never and ever. I get it. But again, this is not... Okay, let's continue on. That doesn't mean that Florida State wouldn't have crawled through broken glass for the 1,000 miles from Tallahassee to Big Ten headquarters in Chicago. It just means the Big Ten wasn't biting ever. So there he uses the word ever. Now, I am not going to use that word ever. I had made it perfectly clear that with no way we're going to shut the door completely. But Florida State, to get into the Big Ten, we believe is a lot better chance for them to go to the SEC. We have made this so damn clear for so long. Florida State would need a lot. They would need the right dominoes to fall. And the idea, and I'm going to make this perfectly clear once again, the idea that there's going to be a Florida State Clemson combo to the Big Ten, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way in hell that's going to happen. I'm trying to be kind as possible. It's not even a possibility. It's not. You got to understand the Big Ten to understand who they're... You got to understand what the presidents are interested in and what they are willing to do with Fox and the Big Ten Network. Their backs have to be scratched. If they're going to go from 18 to 20 members, their backs have to be scratched. So... And I'm going to be, the Big Ten can be picky, and they will be picky. I'm gonna butt in here. We'll go back to the article. Look, we got more information here at Peek Around the Corner. You know, about a month ago, we talked about how might not have been a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, but we talked about how we received information. You know, we've always said that it's for the Big Ten, it's North Carolina, it's Notre Dame, and if neither of those happen, the Big Ten might explore, might pull the trigger on a Miami +1. And we talked about how Michigan, we were told about Miami's research, how it mirrors Michigan. It's like a mini Michigan when it comes to, what is that called? National Health Institute Research, NHI. I believe it's NHI. We went through all that. Not going to go down that rabbit hole again. Just recently, it was yesterday or the day before, Saturday. It was Saturday, May 17th. Again, we talked about the Michigan-Wisconsin faction, the Michigan-Wisconsin-Minnesota Northwestern faction led by Michigan and Wisconsin. And we were told that, look, that the ACC school, beyond the North Carolina-Virginia situation, the ACC school that the Big Ten the Big Ten presidents would want more than any of the other ones, even Georgia Tech, all of them. The Big Ten presidents would want Miami over everybody else, not including North Carolina. Wisconsin wants Miami. Wisconsin is the number one in the country when it comes to genetics, genealogy, whatever that science is, genetics. And that this is what Miami has been producing as a university. It's how they got their AAU. It's how they got Wisconsin in Michigan to vote for their AAU, on and on and on and on and on. Miami has sponsors in the Big Ten. They just do. They do. I know they don't have a football stadium that's close to campus. I know they don't quite have the viewership. I know they're a smaller private university, not a big. I get all that. I'm just telling you, they got people that are willing to at least fight for the to explore the possibility of Miami going to the Big Ten if all these other dominoes don't fall. And so I've said this. I have been saying this for about a long time. Hook your wagons to Miami. If you cannot hook your wagon to North Carolina, and I think somebody's got their wagon hooked to North Carolina, and I think that's the Cavaliers. But if you cannot hook your wagon to North Carolina, and if you can't hook your wagon to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's wagon can't be, there's nothing to hook on right now. If you can't hook your wagon to North Carolina, if you can't hook your wagon to Notre Dame, you've got to hook your wagon to Miami to get into the Big Ten. I've talked about the presidents. I've talked about the politics. I've gone as far as I can possibly go with this. The reason why here at PATC, we're not going to completely shut the door on the Florida State to the Big Ten, like what Matt Hayes has said, what Josh Pate had a source tell him, and he said it in the public, and all these other people, is because we've been told, I have reported, there is this again, people are going to yell at me, but there is this Miami, Florida State. They're not at war with each other. That might be what happens. There's a possibility of that happening. Florida State and Miami. So that's why we're not going to completely shut the door, because we've been told too many things. Look, we are being told by people, by the way, these people have given us the ability to get every Big Ten expansion story nailed to the wall like nobody else. The same people who have helped us nail all these other stories, who told us that Florida State and Clemson were not the number one targets of the Big Ten and the SEC, which we nailed. The same people who've told us this stuff, who are telling us that Florida State is they're not in control of their own destiny. They're not the number one target. They're also telling us, though, there's a back door to all this for Florida State, and that is through Miami. And all I can tell you is it doesn't seem like, I think Miami wouldn't be resistant to it at all. I think Miami will do whatever it needs to do to get into the Big Ten, knowing that they are favored by institutions in the Big Ten. They know that. So that's why we're not going to completely shut the door down on the Florida State thing. But that is where we are. When it comes to the Big Ten, it is more clear. North Carolina, Notre Dame, and if neither of those happen, and it doesn't look like either one of them is happening, then it is Miami +1. And everyone's got to hook their wagon to Miami. That is what we completely, 100%, and we're not the only, again, I'm waiting for somebody somewhere out there that goes beyond what Matt Hayes has said, that goes beyond what John Wilderness says. I think it's going to be said at some point. The Dukes, the Georgia Techs, the Florida States, the Clemsons, their shot at the Big Ten is to hook their wagon to Miami. This ain't the first time we said it. It ain't going to be the last time we say it. And in the SEC, it's a matter of, when it comes to the Southeastern Conference, it's a matter of how thirsty are they, and do they need Florida State and Clemson to get North Carolina, Virginia through the gates? Do they need Clemson and Florida State to grease the skids for the Virginia, North Carolina? This is where we're at. We are not at this, we're not at the SEC expanding with Clemson and Florida State and not including North Carolina and Virginia. We're not at the Big Ten expanding with Florida State and Clemson. That just isn't going to happen. Other things need to be attached to it. Other things need to happen. For the Big Ten, it's Miami. If it ain't going to be North Carolina or Notre Dame. In the SEC, it is not a secret anywhere. I mean, I'm talking about, it is not a secret anywhere. Not with the institutions, not anywhere. SEC's number one target is North Carolina with a bullet. And it's not a secret. I mean, from all the institutions, from all the presidents, from the media partners, it's been leaked 1,000 times over. Okay, let's get back to the article. We got more to go through here. We're going to get to your phone calls. Again, it doesn't mean the Florida State wouldn't have crawled through broken glass with 1,000 miles from Tallahassee to the Big Ten headquarters in Chicago. It just means the Big Ten wasn't biting ever. I do not agree with that ever, but Florida State needs things to go their way to get into the Big Ten. But Florida State was negotiating with the ACC, its home conference, since 1991. The school did want a better deal and did feel as though it bought more time, more to the table than the ACC was given. It did hire attorneys and threaten to leave the conference. It did play a negotiation game that ultimately left it with a clear, self-made path to financially running with the lead pack at the Big Ten and the SEC. And this is what we have said for over a year at PATC. You're not going to be able to stop Florida State at reaching the level that they need to reach to compete at the highest level. They're just too valuable a brand, but it may look different than what a lot of people expected it to look. Or as Alford said, I'll tell of our fans now. I tell all of our fans now, when you come to the game, be sure to leave your televisions on at home. So if you're a Seminole fan, you're going to Doak Stadium, you're going to watch the game, turn on that television, turn on that laptop, turn on whatever platform, make sure you are watching, your television has got the Florida State home game on or away game on. Because those television ratings are not only the lasting takeaway from more than a year of public and at times ugly negotiation with the ACC. They're critical to Florida State's survival. At least now, the Seminoles have a financial destiny in their hands. The more high-value television games they play, the greater the media rights payout from the ACC. How much greater? Maybe as much as $18 million more annually for football and more for basketball. That's in the ballpark, Alford said. Any school in our conference can go out and earn those numbers. And that's what Florida State wanted all along anyway. Alford's point to ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips and the rest of the league. It wasn't physically fair for Florida State and Clemson and Miami to pull the television weight of the conference and everyone else benefit from it. Why should the Seminoles spend top dollar on facilities and recruiting budgets and do everything within their power to field a nationally competitive team and receive the same media rights payout as the other programs in the ACC who aren't invested in getting better and spending money to make money? Why should Florida State, geographically surrounded by SEC recruiting heavyweights, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, and eventually making 50 to 60% more in media rights money, be forced to take the eventual physical undoing? You can argue about the process, and if it's legal wrangling with the ACC hurt relationships with the league, of course it did. But you can't argue with survival mode, and that is the mode that Florida State has been in. That is the mode that Clemson has been in. That is the mold that made Texas and Oklahoma call the SEC, that made USC call the Big Ten. They make sure they get above that revenue stratification line. Florida State has gone a different path. Clemson has gone a different path. That's why Alford was adamant during this week's ACC spring meetings that the ACC should schedule more games of significance between conference members. He wants to play Clemson in Miami and Virginia Tech and North Carolina every year. He wants them to play each other too. Boy, that sounds like that sort of sounds like the Magnificent Seven forming up here. Remember the talk by Radakovich, the Miami athletic director, about a brand division and a non-brand division? Oh boy, that's when when Alford is saying let's play Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, North Carolina every year, when you're grabbing all the brands on your schedule, when you're doing a 5-6 game permanent schedule, permanent rivals on your schedule, and they're all the top brands in the conference, you're basically splitting your conference into two divisions, two stratifications of revenue. He wants them to play each other too. He wants the ACC to grow brands and programs within the conference and win games of significance outside it. Yes, win a playoff game, ACC. Win a playoff game like the season opener against Alabama in Tallahassee. And return game to Tuscaloosa in 2026. Or the home-and-home series with Georgia in 27-28. Or the 26 schedule that includes non-conference games against Bama, Florida, and the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. That's how Florida State will earn the television numbers to reach the media value initiative in the new deal with the ACC. By reaching those numbers, Florida State and Clemson and any other ACC team could earn nearly $60 million annually in media rights revenue. I also disagree with Matt Hayes on this point. Not any other ACC team is going to earn all that money in media rights. The revenue pie is not growing. It's just being divided up differently. Basically, when you're not growing the economic pie, not everybody's boats are going to be lifted. Some boats are going to sink in the ACC. Back to the article. That's the clearest path to financial security. Not hoping for a new football division in 2030, when Florida State is now allowed to leave the ACC with a decreased buyout, or hoping ESPN will restructure a better deal after 2036. The money is there for the taking now. Go get it. The SEC gave its 14 long-time member schools $52.5 million. Big Ten, $63.2 million, 12 of its 14 schools. USC, UCLA joined July 24th, will receive full shares in 25, where the payout is expected to be $75 million for 16 of its 18 schools. Washington and Oregon shares are being phased in over 7 years. And finally, in the article, the ACC is expected to pay out around $37 million to most members, not including California, Stanford, and SMU in fiscal 25. But with media value and success initiatives, that number could jump to $20 million to $25 million. But again, it's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game. One goes up $1, another school goes down $1. The Success Initiative was the first give by the ACC to Florida State and Clemson, where teams will receive a greater share of the college football payout for postseason success. Last December, in the heat of negotiations and legal wrangling with the ACC, Alford told USA Today Sports, "We never said we wanted to leave the ACC." Well, that is not entirely true. I mean, maybe Alford never said that, but there were people in this, the Board of Trustees, some of them said it, Board of Regents, we never said we wanted to leave the ACC. 16 months after a formal notice of withdrawal, less than 3 months later, the ACC came to the table with the workable media value initiative that settled the lawsuits between Florida State and Clemson and conference and put FSU's financial destiny in its hands. And then finally, we're going to do everything we can to grow Florida State, Alford said. Says the guy who got what he wanted all along anyway. In many aspects, Florida State did exactly that. They won the massive victory in the courts. They have a cost certain on what it's going to cost for them to leave the conference, and the ACC has to accept the check if Florida State decides to do so, if they have a landing spot. Florida State has got the ability to make more money going forward, and they're going to make more money going forward. They're going to have the viewership numbers. So in many, many ways, Florida State, Mike Alford got what he wanted for Florida State, for the athletic department. But again, as Matt Hayes said, Florida State was never headed to the Big Ten. Florida State was never negotiating with the Big Ten or having back channel talks with the Big Ten, no matter what some clown on social media proclaimed. I have never spoken to Matt Hayes. I've had the pleasure, very humbled by the opportunity to be able to talk with people behind the curtain. I'll leave it at that. And they have expressed the same phrase, the clown at social media. Again, honest people, really honest, good people, thought that Florida State would be the top target for the SEC or the Big Ten, especially the Big Ten. Good, honest people thought that, and it's not accurate, but it's really no big deal, right? I mean, I've gotten things wrong. I've taken the L on this show. It's just the way it is. You do the best you can. Here at College Football Peek Around the Corner, a national college football YouTube channel, we do the best we can to give you the peek around the corner. On June 15th of 2024, we did the show that I got absolutely hammered on, that Florida State and Clemson were not the number one targets for the Big Ten and the SEC. Just recently, War Chant, very honest people, really good reputations. They had a source tell them that Florida State, that the Big Ten had instigated expansion talks with Florida State. We at Peek Around the Corner went back to our Rolodex of sources, and every one of them said, no way, not happening. Not at this time. The Big Ten is not instigating any expansion talks unless the name North Carolina and Notre Dame is at the other end of the phone call. Again, honest people getting this wrong, it's no big deal. Most of us are trying to give you an accurate picture of what is going on in college football. I will say this. What is also accurate, Matt Hayes did not say this. What is also accurate, even though the Big Ten is not thirsty for expansion, if it ain't North Carolina and Notre Dame, it ain't happening unless it's a Miami +1 situation. And even though the SEC is looking at North Carolina, there is a plethora of ACC schools that are working it. They're doing all they can to try to get to the Power 2. Even though the odds are very small, even though they need the exact correct blend to have a shot, they're working it. They are, I mean, you're talking about SMU situation going to the AACC, where SMU just said, get us in and we'll take care of us, you take care of you, but get us into the ACC. We're talking that level of commitment to try to get to the Power 2, a plethora of ACC schools. So on one hand, you got the Big Ten and the SEC not thirsting unless it's North Carolina, Notre Dame, or, North Carolina for the SEC. But on the other hand, you've got schools that are absolutely working it, trying to build connections, trying to build relationships. And North Carolina's probably gotten a lot of phone calls, and we believe Miami has as well. We're going to get to your phone calls. We're going to get to your comments here. Expedition Greg, thank you so much, Expedition Greg, for your gift and membership. Wow, I don't know who got it. I do not know who got it. It's been a long monologue. My apologies. But Expedition Greg and whoever got that gift and membership, please say thank you to Expedition Greg for his generosity. Both of you are knighted, cloak and dagger. Cloak and dagger. Hammer Hennison, to the Big Ten brass, get what they expected and needed financially by adding Rutgers and Maryland. Yes. To a certain point. Thank you for the super chat, Hammer Henderson. Appreciate it so very much. Rutgers and Maryland, yes, financially. The demographics part, it was the student part, it was the demographics piece. And also getting in, getting more schools in the Eastern media time zone. New Jersey and Maryland having a lot of Big Ten alumni in both those states. Michigan was very interested in these additions because there's a lot of Michigan alumni that live in those two states. However, Big Ten doesn't always get what it wants. And Rutgers in Maryland was also supposed to be a strategic bridge to the Atlantic, the big schools of North Carolina and Virginia. Remember, Maryland and Rutgers got an invitation to the Big Ten when North Carolina and Virginia both said no to the Big Ten. 2010. And the Big Ten would have said no to Rutgers if Maryland, at the very last second, would have decided not to pull the trigger. It would have been no, it wasn't going to be Rutgers 13 and somebody else 14. It had to be, the Big Ten got it down to where Maryland 13, Rutgers 14 would work. At that moment, it would work for the Big Ten. But they needed Maryland, and they got Maryland. It's always about, not always, but most of the time, it's about the right blend. Thank you, Helmer Henderson. Appreciate it. Greg, it was awesome. Shakar, it was great. It was great. Cochinita, I guess it's called, something like that. The wife made it. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Actually, it was 2 days ago and yesterday. Aaron Frazier, guys, you're not looking at this right. The Big Ten TV partners have a say-so. They're going to want teams with national appeal and history for national matchups. Miami and Florida State does that for the Big Ten. I think in many ways you are correct, Frazier. I think so. It might not be Miami and Florida State, however, but I think that combo is still a possibility. That is why I don't quite agree with Matt Hayes when he says never, ever Florida State to the Big Ten. He uses both words, never and ever. I'm not going to go there. But it is true that Florida State hits your wagons to Miami and you got a shot. I think that's the only available spot for Florida State to get to the Big Ten. Because Miami does have sponsors in the Big Ten. We know that for sure. And they got the correct ones. They got the big ones. Florida State Athletic Director spoke at a Chicago booster event in April 24 and said that he expects to be in the Windy City much more starting this summer. Yep, he said that. All I can tell you is we know for certain that Florida State, I'm not going to say who, but representatives of Florida State met representatives of a private equity firm in a restaurant in Chicago on the Chicago River. And we gave that information last summer. So I don't know if Mike Alford was talking about that or talking about meeting Big Ten people, but they did not have first-party talks with the Big Ten. We said that last summer. We got raked over the coals, but it's absolutely 100% true. There could not have been first-party talks because the Big Ten legal counsel would not have allowed it. The SEC would not allow Greg Sankey to have first-party talks with any ACC school either. But that was then. This is now. You can have first-party talks and not have a problem with it because these schools have a way out of their grant of rights. And it's not 12 years from now. They can actually get out in a year. So there can be first-party talks now, but not back in 24. Norvell is going to turn it around. Tony White is great. Tony White is... I'm excited. I know a lot of people are focusing on Gus Malzahn, the offensive coordinator of Florida State, what he's going to do with Castellanos. I'm more interested in Tony White because I know that guy's an absolute stud. Absolute stud. He's good. Very good. Okay, let's open up the phone lines. The phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. 763-260-1333. Give me a call. Talk about college football. Whatever you want to talk about in college football. Again, we've covered a lot of big stories today. USC is not committed to that rivalry going on every single year. Still in negotiations with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, BYU Cougar, Jake Ratzlaff, LJ Martin, Chase Roberts. The floor is yours.
Well, Greg, I'm always going to be pessimistic about my own team because I don't want to jinx them, so I won't talk about them. But we're going to go back to the old Rolling Stone line. You can't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you something. I think that the Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement is going to be a lot smaller than what you think.
You got it. Yep, I've read your comments on it. Go ahead, sir.
I think it's going to be 8 to 10 games against the top brands of the SEC. And I think that Greg Sankey is going to stab Petiti in the back by giving Notre Dame a 5-game scheduling agreement. What I think is going to happen is after all the poaching that occurs, so I think you're going to see the Big Ten pick up probably Miami and Georgia Tech. You're going to see the SEC pick up FSU, Clemson, North Carolina, and UVA. And then Syracuse, Louisville, NC State, and Virginia Tech go to the Big 12. And I think what you'll see happen is the ACC will be left with BC, Pitt, Wake Forest, Duke, SMU, Cal, and Stanford, 7 schools. They'll add Tulane, UConn, and USF for 10 football schools. And then they'll probably raid the Big East for Georgetown, Villanova, and St. John's to go with Notre Dame for a 14-team Olympic sports conference. They'll have their autonomous scheduling governing. They'll have their autonomous governing power for their rules, and they'll keep that. And it'll be academic focus, and it'll be the kind of the group and country club that Notre Dame wants. I think they'll go to 9 games, and Notre Dame will fill out its schedule between 5 games with the SEC and probably 4 with the ACC and whatever it needs, the rest with the Big 12 if the Big 10 doesn't play ball. And I think the SEC, because keep in mind, there's a couple of things that happen with this scheduling agreement that need to be reality. If it's a 20-game scheduling agreement, that is automatically the perception of a breakaway, and it also creates a lot of political conflicts with state legislatures. And let's be honest, the bottom half of the Big Ten playing the bottom half of the SEC doesn't add much additional revenue. In fact, the SEC would make more money playing the top 10 brands of the Big Ten, playing Notre Dame 5 times, and playing maybe the top brands of the Big 12 or ACC the rest of the games. They just will. And they'll sell more tickets that way. And I don't think Sankey's going to give that bailout. I think the Big Ten would love to have 20 games because that forces Notre Dame's hands. But I think ESPN, if they can literally have Notre Dame playing 9 games against against 2 conferences that are exclusive network property, that means that Notre Dame or ESPN likely gets 5 Notre Dame road games and gets that inventory, whereas the scheduling, if Notre Dame's in the Big Ten, they're at the mercy of whatever Fox will give them. So I don't think that, like I said, you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need. And I think that's likely going to happen. I think as far as the playoff goes, I think 4-4, 2.5, 2.5, 3 is going to happen. I think that Big 12 ACC plan for basically one large bid is probably going to happen. I think that will be the compromise that will happen. And, if the ACC gets picked apart, then you'll likely see it be something like 5-3, 5-5-3, 1-1-1, with the ACC probably keeping a bit of itself and the G5 and one at large or something like that. So, those are my thoughts, Greg. As you know, I've thought about this a great deal over times and over the years, but, I just sort of see the reality of this is ESPN is going to want to make sure it keeps its Big 12 and ACC inventory at least valuable. So that's why I think they're going to make sure that they likely will offer the SEC kind of a better deal to, have them pair up with Notre Dame and top brands in the Big 12 and ACC rather than to do a full-on 20-game scheduling agreement with the Big 10. I think that all respect to the Big Ten fans, but you're delusional if you think you're getting 20 games against the ACC. I don't think that happens. That's not making ESPN any money, and it's not really selling extra tickets. And I think if we want to look at this logically, that's the thing that's going to happen. And also, folks, the Big Ten is not expanding into Texas for TCU. If they go into Texas, it's going to be for A&M or the University of Texas. And however long that's going to happen and how long that is from now, it will happen, but they're not going small when they go into Texas. That's it. Have a good day, Greg.
All right, man. Thanks, you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the comment. Great call. I don't know. If there is this Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement, it's going to probably be a lot of games. I was never thinking 20. I'm not even thinking 16. I might not even thinking. I'm thinking maybe 12 games a year, 10 games a year. Number one.
Call from
Big Ten, brother.
Big Ten, brother. Can you hold on for just one moment?
I sure can, Greg.
Appreciate it. Just trying to finish it up.
Take your time. Take your time, buddy.
What was that?
Take your time, buddy.
Okay. So I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this, if there is a scheduling agreement with the Big Ten SEC, maybe it is like 20 games or 18 games or whatever number of teams SEC has, 16. But I was thinking more like 12 or 10 season. Also, I know. I think the bottom half of the Big Ten, it's not like large markets ESPN would love. I don't know if that's bottom half of the Big Ten is not absolutely worthless like a lot of people believe it is. It's definitely not. Large markets, a lot of money, and the national advertisers love them. So I don't agree with that necessarily. But again, if the Big Ten and the SEC do the scheduling agreement, a formal one in which they both can make more money from their media partners, a formal scheduling agreement, I don't think they're going to include other conferences in their scheduling agreement. But they're not going to stop playing other teams from other conferences. That's why I don't think it's going to be a 16. I think there's going to be like one every 3 years, a Big Ten team is not going to have an SEC team on the non-conference schedule. Like 2 out of every 3 years are going to be playing an SEC team. If this scheduling agreement happens, I don't foresee a complete shutdown of not playing anybody else, not playing any other Power 4 team. If you're a Big Ten school, and if they have the scheduling agreement with the SEC, I don't foresee a future where a Big Ten school never plays a Big 12 team or an ACC team. I don't think so. Again, though, it gets a little bit more limited. That I would agree with, especially on the SEC side when they're going 8 to 9 conference games. However, having said all that, there are a few planes that need to be landed. We need to get that plane that is the SEC going to 9 conference games. That plane has to land, and then we'll eventually get to this possible scheduling agreement with the Big Ten and SEC. Big Ten, brother, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. The floor is yours.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot. I like that first caller. I like how thought out he is. It sounds like he sits in his home and just tries to figure out different scheduling.
He's a very smart. Very smart.
He is.
Yeah, he's a lawyer, very smart guy. He's always sending me great information. Absolutely.
Yeah, very well thought out. I think to myself, geez, I don't even think about football as much as he did, and I played for 19 years. Mm-hmm. But anyway, let's get back to the point. The two things that he's missing on, I like how he thinks, but when he said that, he thinks that the SEC will stab the Big Ten in the back and give Notre Dame a 5-game, kind of like what the ACC has with Notre Dame. There's two things that the Big Ten has that Notre Dame desperately wants, and they're already ringing the phone off the hook. One of them is they appreciate the fact that the Big Ten has Notre Dame's hockey team and will schedule Notre Dame's hockey team every year and bring them into the fold, let them play the Big Ten teams, because they really don't have, I mean, you have other places they could go, Boston University, but there's only North Dakota State. There's only so many schools they can play in hockey. They can't play them 4 times every season, so they need the Big Ten for their hockey team to survive. And the second thing that the Big Ten has that Notre Dame really wants is they want USC back. Please don't take USC rivalry away from us. That's the one thing
Notre Dame wants to play a national schedule. This is why they've been independent for decades, for over 100 years. They want to play where their fans are. And their fans are all over the country, but they're in certain, like in California, they're all over the place. Los Angeles, that's why 7 decades ago, 1920s, that's more than 7 decades ago, they started playing USC. It's why they play Indiana. Of course, they're in Indiana, but that's why they played. They've got the Chicago home base. They got out west home base. They got the east home base. But the SEC country is not Notre Dame country. That is not where Notre Dame fans are. So I don't think they'd be all that interested. But, they do play SEC teams, no question about it. I don't know about a 4 or 5 game schedule. Go ahead, sir.
I agree that they'll throw like they do now. They have Texas A&M on there, the Arkansas on there. They're going to play SEC teams. There's no doubt about it.
No question.
But for them to stab the Big Ten in the back and work out a deal where we'll play 5 SEC teams every year, like we do the ACC now, and we'll ignore the Big Ten. There's no way that they're going to. They want USC, like you said. They go out to California and play Stanford and USC every other year so that they get out there once a year to play in California in front of their alumni. That's why they go out to USC and play 1 year. Then the next year they'll go out to play Stanford the following year. They try to get out there once a year, and they do that on the East Coast with Army and Navy. That's why they won't get rid of Army and Navy, because they could go to Yankee Stadium and play Army or Navy, whoever they play out there, and play. You know how many Notre Dame alumni are in New York? So they're never going to give up Army, Navy, and they want USC. They're deathly afraid of USC saying, we're not interested. That's why they brought Stanford to the ACC. They wanted to keep them close so that they can go out there and play Stanford. So that's why Notre Dame does have an alliance. As much as they don't see eye to eye, there is a hidden thing there with don't let us keep playing USC. Whatever you guys work out with USC as a conference, but please keep the door open so we can play USC. So that's why there'll always be a little bit of loyalty towards the Big Ten over everybody else. The second thing is Florida State really worked themselves into a great position. They get the biggest piece of the pie with this rating thing with the TV. Meanwhile, they're getting the bigger piece of the pie, making more money on views, which we know they're going to get the most views in the ACC, them or Clemson, probably Florida State. But meanwhile, they're grabbing a bigger piece every year of that TV revenue, and they're getting closer and closer and closer to being able to get out of their deal with the ACC and to be able to work out whether they're going to work out with the SEC or the Big Ten. They really put themselves in a great position because they're going to make more money every year with this TV deal. But then they know that eventually they're going to leave. They're not going to stay there for 20 years and grab a bigger. They're going to leave because their fans are going to demand eventually that they join one of those two conferences because they're going to get tired of playing in the ACC. Even if they get a bigger piece of the pie, the fans are going to say, that's great. You're making another $20 million a year. You went from $35 million to $55 million, but the Big Ten is still making $77 million plus another $23 million in playoff money. You're still $50 million behind the Big Ten and the SEC. Plus, you know what? We want to see you play Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Washington, Penn State. So even though you're making a little bit more money, you're not quite where the Big Ten and the SEC. And Florida State fans are competitive. They want to get into the best conference they can get into, and they want to play the toughest teams. So they're not going to be satisfied with staying in the ACC. At least that's the way I see it, Greg.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I mean, I think both Florida State Seminole fans, I mean, on one hand, they're going, good. Okay, we're gonna make more money because we got the viewership, and according to the new unequal revenue share in the ACC, we're gonna make out pretty good. Seminole fans know they're gonna make out pretty good, but the Seminole fans also want Florida State to get to the SEC or the Big Ten.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think the chances of them going to the Big Ten are pretty small. I think they're going to have to, if it's going to happen, it's going to be with Miami. And but we'll see. We'll see what happens here. But it's Matt Hayes. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, but Matt Hayes reported USA Today that Florida State was never headed to the Big Ten. Florida State was never negotiating with the Big Ten or having back channel talks with the Big Ten, no matter what some clown on social media proclaimed. That doesn't mean Florida State wouldn't have crawled through broken glass for the 1,000 miles from Tallahassee to the Big Ten headquarters in Chicago. It just means that the Big Ten wasn't biting ever. And I've heard, Josh Pate said this out in the open. Other reporters have alluded to it. I'm not willing to go that far because ever is too long of a time. But Florida State, I think the chances, when it comes to Power 2, we have said this for many months, their best pathway, the one that's most likely of the two, is for them to get into the SEC. We'll see if it happens.
And I agree with that. I'm not saying that they're going to the Big Ten. I lean towards the SEC too. But my point was that the Florida State's in a great position to go to either or the Big Ten or probably the SEC. But the main thing is they're making more money every year. They can bide their time a little bit more until they decide to leave the ACC. They're going to make more money every year. And then let's say they go to the SEC. And then when they jump to the SEC, at least they made more money over the next 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
By the time they pull the plug. One more point. What's interesting, I don't think what people understand when they keep saying, but look, Clemson and Florida State are better than Rutgers. But people have to understand the Big Ten. The Big Ten looks at it. They look at the big picture. They don't just look at wins or losses on the football field. If they just look at that, they would have never invited Maryland and Rutgers, even though Maryland and Rutgers was a bridge to the ACC.
Yeah.
They look at the big picture. And like you said, North Carolina, I agree with this 100%. What people don't look at, Miami is a private school that's an AAU school. The Big Ten absolutely loves that, and they hold that a lot higher than wins and losses. They look at Miami and say it's a private school, AAU school. It's almost comparable to what Northwestern is, a private school, an AAU school. That's what the Big Ten, they love that more than looking at a school that's like, well, they've been in the national championship game 3 times in the last 10 or 20 years. That's great, but AAU, private school, and their research department in Miami is unbelievable. That's what the Big Ten wants. If they could get Miami and North Carolina, and that would be it for all their expansion forever, they would jump on that today.
Got it. All right, man.
All right, buddy?
Hey, Big Ten brother, don't make it such a long time for your next phone call.
All right, buddy.
All right,
Talk
man.
to you later.
Appreciate it.
All right.
You, sir.
All right, bye-bye. Good luck. Bye-bye.
BD. So why did Florida State's administration and athletic director get their fan base so worked up about changing conferences when they certainly knew they didn't have an invitation? I am going to defend Michael Alford here a moment. I remember the date. It was February 24th, 2023. The reason I remember that date is because we got information and we did a live show on December 26, 2022, that in 2 months, the Florida State was going to come out and say something in public, and they're going to they're going to put their flag in the ground. 2 months later, February 24th, 2023, you can Google it, Mike Alford came out in public and said, the ACC has to change. The ACC has to change. They got to do something. Michael Alford never said, we've got an invitation to the Big Ten of this. He never said any of that. Now, the chairman of the board of trustees of the Board of Regents at Florida State, Phil, I forget his name, was it Phil Collins or is that the drummer? Whatever the guy's name is, I've forgotten. He came, he made it, he was kind of pushing it that way. The major problem was you had people out there, one in particular, who knew he did not have the story because he's not real. He doesn't talk to anybody. And he put out a couple years of messaging that Florida State has an invitation. They've been approved. And this is the same guy who said that USC wasn't going to the Big Ten. He swore at me for three months on X. Someone just sent me a picture. The same guy just swore on X again about something else. Unprofessional, just a pathological liar. And he trolled the fan base. He trolled War Chant. I had a whole bunch of people on War Chant say, Greg. And I did the best I could to say, no, there is no invitation. It's not even possible. None of this is true. Unfortunately, the character that said all this for 2 years, he's not going to take the L. He's not going to take responsibility. He just isn't going to do it. Florida State is a great university, an unbelievable brand in college football. Unbelievable. I mean, it is gigantic. An immersion research university. They're going to get to where they need to get to. And they're about to do it right now. And then we're going to see 3 or 4 years from now. But So nobody was really promising that. Well, there's a few others. There's a few Florida State insiders, supposed insiders, that reported that they've got they've got their spot secured. It wasn't even possible. It couldn't even been. It wasn't even possible because the legal counsels of the SEC and the Big Ten would not allow first-party talks with any of these ACC schools that had a gore out until 2036. But again, that isn't, when I say all that, none of that was sexy, right? None of that brought clicks and views to our channel, right? Even though I'm a supposed grifter, I told the truth that had many people go away from this channel. A lot of people unsubscribed. But that is, that's just the way it is. We are not going to bend our message just to be popular. Matt Hayes, Florida State, was never headed to the Big Ten, never negotiated with the Big Ten. They couldn't have been. They couldn't have been. Or having back channel talks with the Big Ten. And a lot of, and it ain't just Matt Hayes. I mean, it's all of them. Nobody is going to refute what Matt Hayes just said. Nicole Arbach, who just got married, she's not going to refute it. Heather Denich is not going to refute it. Brett McMurphy is not going to refute it. Dennis Dodd, if he was still in the business, he wasn't going to refute it. In fact, he said all of them, Ross Dellinger, all of them have been told the same thing, that Florida State has an uphill battle. Clemson has an uphill battle. All these schools have an uphill battle, except for North Carolina. All of them have an uphill battle into the P2, except for North Carolina. And that has reasons to do other than athletics. And then Miami's in a pretty good spot. Everybody wants to hitch their wagon to Miami because it's also not a secret that the Big Ten presidents would vote for Miami if everything else is correct. I mean, even Miami doesn't hold their own destiny in their hands. Okay, we've got time for a couple more phone calls. Let it rip. If you want to give us a call, 763-260-1333, 763-260-1333. Talk about anything your heart desires. Again, we went through the Notre Dame USC football series. It's in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy.
From
Rock and Rant.
Rock and Rant, the floor is yours. I know why you called. I know why you called. You
because
are
you know
either
that I'm in
very excited that I've got Louisville now ahead of Miami. I got Louisville number 2 and Miami 3 because you think I am Greg the Cooler, or you are very upset with me, and I'm betting that you're upset with me. I am betting that you're upset with me because you know deep down in your heart, deep down in your soul, that this year, 2025, is the year of Greg the Gold, and you know I'm going to nail the ACC order of finish prediction. Number 1, Clemson. Number 2, Louisville. Number 3,
Greg, it's more like Greg the Gold is this thing where it's like a movie that you kind of want to see, you're curious about, but like it never actually comes out despite seeing the promos for it. Like your Greg the Gold segments are just the trailers for things that I've never yet to see in my life. So I'm happy to see that. But yes, I'm not mad that you picked Miami 3. I'm definitely happy that you didn't because I still feel for Justin and what you did to NC State last year. So I remember the moment, and I'm relishing in it, and I'm thinking maybe your hands were too small for the keyboard to type properly, just to bring it all full circle.
Well, look,
you know,
again, that's Greg, the coolest stuff. This year's totally different. I fell in love. Louisville has fallen in love with me. Louisville has fallen in love with me. And me and Miller Moss, we're going to go all the way down the aisle and we're getting married. Let's go, Cardinals. Let's go. Let's go. Go ahead, sir.
You know, the thing I'm excited about is, and you wouldn't necessarily know because I've lived all over the place and you know me as a Miami guy, is the possibility that, you know, the Knicks and the Timberwolves.
Ooh. Yes. Bring it on, Knicks. Bring it on, New York. Bring it on. You've got the Villanova. You've got the Villanova situation. You got John Randall and Karl Anthony Towns situation. You've got Thibodeau, who used to be a a Minnesota coach situation. You got a lot of situations going on. New York and Minnesota. New York hasn't won an NBA World Championship since 1973. Oklahoma City Thunder has never won it. Minnesota has never won it. Indiana Pacers have never won it. So it's wild stuff in the NBA playoffs. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's really going to be amazing, and looking forward to it in a way that I haven't paid attention to NBA in a moment, but only because we'll be able to give each other grief on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not, like, someone's going to take this as a gloat, but I'm not here to gloat. Like, I feel for Florida State fans, right? Because the narrative, you know, if we went through all of your episodes and we went through all of the publications, like, I get why the things that are being said now are hard to take, or that they might need Miami to get somewhere, because for so long the narrative was the opposite, right? Like, whatever the truth was or wasn't, the reports were, and that's like what the narrative was a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I know you addressed it a little bit, but it does also seem that as much as there are reports now talking about that Florida State might have more of a challenge or need somebody else to get there, that a lot of those people were also at one point definitively listing Florida State first, right? So were their sources completely wrong then? I don't even mean yours. I just mean the proverbial sources, right? Because there were times in publications where some of the same people asked the same question about realignment 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, would have listed Florida State first with their choice of probably the Big Ten before others, before the North Carolina stuff really became clearer. So I also understand the skepticism that people might have about any reports, because this has been, you know, the college football realignment yo-yo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know. Like, I understand all of those takes. I mean, maybe because I've been part of Miami for the last 20 years where things have been 7-5 every year. You know, there wasn't as many assumptions, even though I have heard Big Ten before I even knew you existed. As a long run, and that was probably just more related to a past president coming from Wisconsin and those relationships. But, you know, I am more curious about the national reporters who are really definitive now, as opposed to, like, things change, right? And those things always change. But were they just completely misled? Were certain Florida State insiders completely misled? Was it just overconfidence? Was it groupthink? They're going to be fine either way, right? Like, none of these schools are likely going to the Big 12. There are other schools that might, but it's unlikely that those scenarios come up. I'd actually almost imagine a group of, the Magnificent Seven doing something first before any of them went to the Big 12, personally.
I think, and as wild, as crazy as this sounds, I brought this up before, and I know you have brought this up, or other people on your shows have brought this up. You know, if there is a situation in which a Florida State and a Clemson does not leave the ACC, they're sitting there in 2030, 31, and maybe only a couple ACC schools have left. You know, I know it sounds crazy and ludicrous, complete speculation, wild speculation, but that, you know, you start thinking of other possibilities. What the Big 12 grant of rights ends at 2030, 31. ACC schools can get out of theirs for $75 million in 30-31. And then you start thinking about, possible top brands of the Big 12, ACC, because forming something different. Because I am convinced that although Florida State knew that they did not have a home in the Power 2, and they might get one, but they knew at this time they don't have one. They've known this all along. Michael Alford, I told people this. Michael Alford were interviewed by reporters. This is a known thing. Florida State knew that they weren't the top targets. They were not out in the cold. They knew all this. They knew they weren't the top targets of the Big Ten and SEC. But having said that, I'm also 100% convinced that Florida State is not going to remain in this current ACC until 2036. Whatever they're going to be in, it's going to be looking different than what it is now at some point. I'm convinced. Personally, I'm convinced.
No way that they...
Huh?
Yeah, there's no way that they will stay that long. First of all, they're probably going to go to one of the two, right? Most likely. But if I'm
they
not saying
don't,
Florida State fans, I'm not saying this, but some weird thing happens and whatever. Miami and Florida State, neither of them go to the Power 2, right? Which is played out, so no one's thinking taking shots, but I'm really not. The best thing for those schools to do is to take the best brands that are in the ACC and the best brands, and if that's 2, 3, or 4 of the Big 12 who draw the most, have some degree of cultural affinity, even though it won't be the exact same for all the reasons we already know, and raise the floor for everybody so that there's less of a milker, so to speak, on the bottom, and have as high of the ceiling, right? You're still not closing the millions of gaps between what the Big Ten and the SEC are, but just taking Florida State, Clemson, Miami, whatever, and going to the Big 12, you still don't actually solve the basic problem, right? Which is that you don't have enough brands propping up things to close the gap, and you have brands that don't actually, just from the TV side, I'm not talking about great academic institutions, awesome on the field, great coaches. I'm just talking about the math of this one part of however many levers there are. You'd be better off just creating another third conference with the best of the best brands, that the floor is the worst brand is better than the average of the collective, whatever that is, 35, 33 schools, and creating a 16-team, 14-team conference out of that. Because that's where you're still not closing the gap, but you'd at least be reducing it relative to the drag that other awesome institutions that maybe don't draw the money from the network interest. That's what I think would happen. Again, I still don't think that's what's going to happen. I think it's a Power 2 move for Florida State. Ultimately, I prefer it to be together. I prefer whatever forum for the two schools to keep playing. I will still never get anyone who thinks it's a really smart idea to destroy rivalries. USC, Notre Dame, don't really care. Stop making excuses. Solve the damn thing. Enough is enough. Same thing with Miami, Florida State. Don't really get it. There's a way to figure it out either way if we really want to, especially with guaranteed bids. But it is still curious to me. Now that you're saying Alfred has known that forever, I'm even more either, I don't know if I'm impressed or shocked that they did the lawsuit. Because if you didn't know you had a landing place,
they didn't know they had a risk. No, and again, I had 1,000 phone calls. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but between the phone calls and the comments, it's not saying, Greg, they wouldn't be in the courts unless they knew they had a Power 2 spot. And I kept saying, but that's exactly what happened. They went to the courts and they don't know if they have a Power 2 spot.
Clemson's lawsuit fit that mode, right? Clemson's lawsuit fit we just want to know what the cost is of getting that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Florida State's one came with plus a whole gasoline can.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why people just made the assumption. I thought so too. They must have known because you're going out with fire. Clemson did the way of we just want to know so that we know, regardless of whether we have a landing spot, we just have a definitive thing. So if and when we have a landing spot, we know what the cost is. Whatever Florida State did and Clemson to a second degree was the Lord's work for conference realignment fans who feel they'll be in a good spot after. So there's no rec, but it makes it. Imagine if way back when those lawsuits were first filed, and I don't remember you saying that you did or didn't think that they knew they had a landing spot.
Yeah.
But at that time, I thought most of the people thought they must have known something. It made that decision even more interesting than it already was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
all righty, man.
Anyway, just chiming in, man. Have the rest of a good show.
Yeah, you
Thanks
too,
again.
Rock and Rant. Beautiful call, sir.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful call. Rock and Rant, Mr. Hurricane. It sounds like Rock and Rant is happy that I've got Louisville number 2 and Miami number 3. He's happy today, but he's going to be unhappy in late November. Rock and Rant is going to be unhappy late November. CFB Plus, Greg, what is more likely, Florida State ending up in the Big Ten or the Big 12? So, I would say it's more likely Florida State ends up in the Big Ten. Again, the pathway is very narrow. I've been saying that for almost a year now. It's very narrow, very narrow. They gotta have the right things happen. They gotta hook themselves up with Miami, and they gotta build those relationships with the Big Ten, because the Big Ten, none of these reporters are going to come out and say Florida State is knocking on the door to join the Big Ten. I know War Chant said the Big Ten has instigated expansion talk with Florida State. We've checked everybody, and everyone said that ain't happening. But I would still have Big Ten above the Big 12. However, and again, at some point, so at some point, if Florida State and Clemson are in the ACC in 2028, 2029, if they're still in the ACC, people are going to start talking about another option. It's the one that me and Rock and Rant went back and forth on. The option that is going to be really disruptive, in the option of some sort of other form of power conference going to get formed. And with Big 12 and ACC schools. I think that option is going to, if you've got a beachhead of a Florida State, a Clemson, a possible Miami, with or without Miami, but that is a beachhead to form a new conference, for them to spend $75 million and try to get an 8-team conference with the most valuable brands possible, 8, 10, 12-team conference, because I don't think Florida State is going to be a member of the ACC past a certain year, no matter, I mean, even if they cannot get to the Big Ten. So I don't think it's a Florida State to the Big 12. I don't think that's, again, I'm not going to say never, but I think that is they did have third-party talks. So did Clemson. So did Louisville. Probably others. But I think there is this other idea of, maybe there's going to be another option being talked about if Florida State and Clemson remain in the ACC in 28, 29, and 30. I don't pay any attention to that 99-year Gore thing. That is those schools are not attached to the grant of rights. Only really goes to the extension of your media rights deal. That 99-year thing means absolutely, I shouldn't say it does, it means very little. It definitely does not mean what a lot of people think it means. That 99-year thing is not, anyway, it's not ironclad. Okay, we'll use that word. It's not ironclad. Okay, we've been on the air for over 2 hours. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Smash that like button if you've liked our content today. And share the video with your family and friends. I want to say thank you to those who donated today to help us keep the lights on. Esmus Talks, Expedition Greg, and Helmer Henderson. Thank you so very much for your generosity, helping us keep the lights on. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody coming on in and joining us. We've almost have already 1,400 views. It was an absolute stack show today. Again, make sure you subscribe and have your notifications turned on, because we can come on live at any time, any time during the day, night. Sometimes we have 2 live shows a day. We have covered a lot, and we didn't even go through everything. There is an article out that I want to talk about sometime this week on the over win totals of certain teams that I think you should go over on. I think they're absolute locks, Greg the Gold. But today we talked about the Notre Dame USC football series. It's in jeopardy. And we talked about the Florida State, Matt Hayes, USA Today Network. Florida State was never headed to the Big Ten. Florida State was never negotiating with the Big Ten or having back channel talks with the Big Ten, no matter what some clown on social media proclaimed. Wow. Matt Hayes, USA Today Network. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you all talking college football. Buckle up, brace for impact, keep your head on a swivel. We're still in May. May matters. We know we're going to get more and more of this type of reporting throughout the month. Until next time, from all of us at College Football's Peek Around the Corner, to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.